A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Magandang umaga po, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, magandang gabi. The greeting goes for all time zones, wherever our listeners may be located. Pero ganoon na rin, pag talagang gusto natin mag-shortcut, magandang araw. So it's a beautiful day and it always should be a beautiful day. Nagkaroon nga kami ng dyaryo, ang pangalan, Good Morning Philippines, kasi every day should be a good morning. Anyway, so welcome to our Chronicles, and this is Rita Gadi. We are already approaching a day or so, the end of 2023, and soon enough, the beginning of 2024. So we've thought of coming out with a title which is not so foreboding when we say that we're closing a year, and neither so overly optimistic, so that we're looking forward to 2024 with such great hope, which should really be the case. Great hope indeed. So that's why we say we have subtractions and we have additions. Today, likewise, is the commemoration of Jose Rizal Day, or whatever that may be worth, 100 or so years ago, at Luneta, Bagumbayan, as it was called then, when this man who wrote two important novels and also continued to write for La Solidaridad, even when he was abroad, a doctor, an artist, a philosopher, a man of letters, and now our national hero. Lolo Pepe, as he's called in this latest book, Jose Rizal. And today is what we commemorate as far as his martyrdom is concerned. Why did he have to be shot? Because he wrote two scathing novels that talked about many of the anomalous incidents and episodes during that time when our country for over 300 years was under the colonial power of Spain. And that is why we were called Pilipinas, after the son of the king and queen of Spain, Felipe. So parang pinagbigyan yung anak na magkaroon siya ng isang bansa, because at the time, that was what Europe was all about. The powers of Europe, that's why they were called the First World, they went all over the world. And so they said that whatever country that they're able to invade and conquer and name, sa kanila na yon. In fact, as far as we were concerned, there was a division of Spain and Portugal. Kaya sabi nga, nagkasundo yung mga hari at reyna nung panahon na yon. Pagka dito ang ating barko papunta sa kaliwa, lahat ng ating bansa na matatagpuan para sa Spanya. Sa kabila naman, lahat ng matatagpuan mo doon sa Portugal. But in many ways, they also crisscross. So whatever reason they may have for dividing the world, that is how it was then. And you could see that from, what was this, 16th century? Now we are the 2023. We still have powers that intend to divide the world. What is happening, for instance, around our area, the South China Sea, now being debated upon by several countries, claiming ownership of the waters, the islands, the rocks, the shoals, or whatever else could be seen within this area. So that is why we always say that sana pag-usapan na lang. At ang dagat kasi kagaya ng lupa at ng hangin, hindi naman sa atin yan eh. That is God-given. It is not part of the industry of our, or the labor of ourselves. It has been there. So why should anybody own it? But then, of course, that's another reason altogether. Let's go now to what is important as far as this day is concerned. the 30th of December, not just the martyrdom of Dr. Jose Rizal, our national hero, but I'd also like to remember this day, a year ago, when suddenly we were awakened by the sad fact that our good friend, an intellectual, a man of ideas, who has organized so many movements, who established the Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino, which is our carrying channel, who has launched the Save the Nation movement, and several others likewise. Our good friend, our patron, our father, our neighbor, my neighbor, 78 steps from my doorstep to his doorstep, Sir Butch Valdez. So we honor him today, 1 year of his death anniversary. And do we miss him? But of course we do so much. There has been many thoughts and ideas and writings that he has left us. But more importantly, he has given us the passion to continue with this movement, each in our own way. Although this has been spelled out, this actually has been spelled out in a manifesto, in several articles, in many speeches, in so many statements. Let us all try to save the nation. But beyond that, to bring the nation also back to God. So that is the importance that we commemorate today. The first year anniversary of the death of Sir Butch Valdez, the 100 years or so, 127, 23, oh my goodness, I'm losing count of this, of Dr. Jose P. Rizal, and of course, the end days of 2023, and soon enough, the opening days of 2024. But here we are with the table in front of us, where I have so many notebooks. How many are these? It has been a habit of mine to record just about the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis, especially from the executive department, and most especially now from the office of the president. This is not just a habit I acquired when I was covering Ferdinand Edralin Marcos, but it has also been the case even with the presidents after him. But now, most especially, because the son is a Ferdinand Marcos Jr., and that becomes equally more important on my part, personally, professionally, and politically. So, with the three-piece there all lined up, that's exactly how I feel that at this particular stage, it is so important to understand where we are, where we have been over the past 2 years under Ferdinand Marcos Jr., and where we'll be proceeding after this year. So what is it that he has established when he rose to power? But before he rose to power, he already established the name which he inherited from his father. But beyond that, there was this passionate clamor. His name, BBM, as they would be screaming all over the rallies. The 31 million votes that are recorded. However else people will be questioning this, they call it the smart magic. For whatever reason there may be that there are questions regarding this. But we have seen the rallies, and we have seen how the people have responded to him whenever he was on the road, moving from one destination to the other, the clamor, the shouts, the call, BBM, Bong Bong Marcos. And so there was not just the agitation for him to occupy the highest seat of power, but the most important aspect of that was perhaps there could be, after what, 37, 38, 40 years since his father was president, here is another Marcos. So today we look at it from that perspective, but from a different angle, because this is a completely different personality that we have today. Some say that it is really the person, but then of course we understand that personified power is really not important as far as the heroism of a leader is concerned. Because personified power is a threat, actually, to the integrity of heroism. Because there is the importance of having a mental and an emotional balance as far as leadership is concerned. And also, what is important, that the masses that have supported the leader will continue to sustain that passion for the loyalty and the respect and the honor and the sustainability of their holding on to the belief that this is the leader indeed, that is the country's most important personality. So it is not just personified power that we have to talk about, because many people have written about this, and nowadays that's exactly what is happening with people getting elected into office. It's more personality based, the personality cult, as they say. But we must understand that the legitimacy of power really derives from the inner aspect of a person. And that is why we look at Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in that aspect. We look forward to a future where, as they say, why do you climb a mountain? Because it is there. And yet so many people have attempted this. It is not just the height, it is not just the excitement, but there is the impetus to reach a certain height and claim a certain degree of dominance over everything else. Well, maybe someday we will see the mountains ahead of us, the mountains of our own mysterious destinies, and maybe someday we will see beyond our respective personal and collective chaos, and there will always be another mountain where we could really say, we have seen the sunlight and we have seen our destiny. So here we are with that question. Are we seeing our destiny? 2 years past and 4 more years to go. So here we are with the pinnacle of power that we are always talking about. Pinnacle, actually. Because here we can see that at that particular stage, at that particular pinnacle, the leader and the people ought to be just one, because the people are represented by that person that sits in that position of power. And so we have this ecstasy, this passion, this adulation, this admiration that we have for Bongbong Marcos, for Ferdinand Marcos Jr. He's the product of all of this campaign hysteria that we have seen during the rallies, a product likewise of his education, a product of his parents, a product of his environment, a product of the many things that he has gone through in life, from the exile that they had, the period of sufferance, and then, of course, many other political episodes that he has been involved in. All of that coloring the kind of person that he is. And so we have him now as the president, to whom we have delegated our authority. He is what we call the hero of our acceptance, in a way. He is the exchange into the hierarchy of what we have to admit as not just the son of his father, but the visionary that we would hope he would be able to pursue as he leads the nation and the country. So I've taken down notes, which I said is really habitual on my part, notes on many of his statements, many of his exclamations, his pronouncements, the programs that he has set, the media exchanges that he has quite regularly. He also has a blog, sometimes at the end of a travel or at the end of an important conference, and he sits down and talks to us and tells us, well, this has been what we have taken up, and this is exactly what I intend to do, and these are the programs that are already set for the people. So how is this? This is the responsibility that we have put on his shoulders. And so now, after 2 years, we ask the question, are we content with all that has happened in the past 2 years? And do we look forward with great hope that there will be additions now for what is happening, what will be happening for the next 4 years hence until the next presidential election. So let's see if our notes can have a review of the programs that he has set from the time that he has made his inaugural address. I've already repeated this a number of times that I particularly practically memorized that line, which I find so enticing and so inspiring. Ang panaginip ninyo ay panaginip ko rin. Your dreams are also my dreams. Can you imagine somebody who can hold our dreams in the palm of his hands as he sits in the pinnacle of power to govern the country, to lead the people? And so he comes quite often during cabinet meetings with his executive department members, executive department secretaries, and to them he gives the directives, the pronouncement. This is what I want done. You see how important it is that the lessons actually we learn are the stories that we tell. As it has been said, the stories we tell is what builds our nation. So we listen to his quite regular meetings with the cabinet and treat this as the storytelling of the life of our country, of the history of our country on a day-to-day basis, the responsibility and the application of his words to the many programs that are now set for the different departments. First, he had to tackle what has happened when we went through the years of the COVID. What a virus it was, that we had to be confined to our homes, that many businesses and many industries and many other activities had to be stopped, had to be suspended, and that we could not communicate with each other on a face-to-face basis. It was difficult because we were such a healthy and confident people, and all of a sudden we had to be confined to quarters. But be that as it may, our BBM, our new president, decided that we are now entering the post-pandemic, and it is a new day, he said. And he comes out with a good story that there are priorities now that we have to handle. We know now how to be able to confront should another virus infect us. We are now able to monitor many of the things that were not monitored before. We are now able to set to motion many of the businesses that were suspended. And then, of course, we had the mushrooming of other small businesses that thrived during that pandemic. But then you had the president on top of it all who said that this is the thrust that we have. So whatever it is that we have during the past confinement or quartering that we had, yung sinasabi nga na parang, anong tawag nito, yung you were confined to quarters. There was this period na talagang napakahirap, but nonetheless, he came up with several strong programs. One of them, for instance, was like the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which regionally was what it was called until it was renamed as the Maharlika Investment Fund, a state-owned investment fund that would have money generated from several sources, from government sources also, and from the country's surplus resources as it should be. And all of this actually coming into not just bank reserves, but also accumulated from budgeting exercises, from foreign currency transactions, money from privatizations, etc., and several others. I do not have the listing exactly of the sourcing, but there you have it, quite ambitious and quite important. And it took some time until they were able to fine-tune exactly what it was. And it has also been part of the banner that he has been presenting to the world. He traveled several times over the past 2 years, and that's exactly why he said that there is a new meaning now in what we are doing as far as government is concerned. We have had periods of, of suffering, and now we are in the period of joy. So that is exactly what the voice of the president brings out when he says that these are the programs we have. And most important, of course, was the department that he held, the Department of Agriculture. How important is this? My goodness. Food on the table for 110 million Filipinos, just enough to be properly given the nutrition that we need, not just to grow physically, but also mentally, and most importantly, intellectually and emotionally in many sense, because everything affects us emotionally and mentally, especially when there is not enough food or there is scarcity of what there is to eat. So that is why he held precisely that department for close to 2 years until a couple of months ago when he appointed a new secretary for the Department of Agriculture. But that was how important he gave to the program of agriculture. Not only did he see the importance of agriculture as the security measure of every life, actually, from the womb to the tomb, as a matter of fact, as his mother early on also proclaimed as part of the importance of a person's development, growth from the fetus all the way actually. So that is how it goes. He has been meeting with his cabinet as regularly as, I don't know, maybe 3 times a week even, especially during the early years of his administration. And there we could see the effects and the movements of the different departments. I do not have a profile of the different secretaries of all the executive offices, but we can see that some of them have already had experiences in the past. And there were a lot of, a lot of frowning as far as names were concerned. But we have considered the fact that government starts running on the first day. You can't wait for a week or so and scout around for those that you will put in the office. As soon as you take your oath, and that's the first day, the inaugural, you already have the listing and the names and the persons and the actual human beings that will be occupying those positions. So that was how it was. And of course, many of them are, to many of the people, perhaps they are familiar with such names, not quite familiar with their expertise, but we've seen that many of them have already served in the past in different offices, or at least both in private and government, and they've had quite a knowledgeable experience in this, episodes of their talents, and of course, the expertise they have for those respective departments. But then, of course, he had a vice president that ran with him in what was called as the Uni Team, and that was Vice President Sara Duterte, who was immediately appointed as the Secretary of Education, because that is one of the most important departments that is actually the foundation, the bedrock of any country for that matter. So how important it is? Well, that is where the growth of the nation actually begins. So you have there the vice president leading that education department, and already in the early stages reviewing what has happened in the past as far as that's concerned. So we had, for instance, the kindergarten up to the 12th year, which also has to be reviewed, but I think it has already reached the stage where some of those extra years may possibly be aborted already, and there will be a realignment of other subjects and other items in the curricula, so that you could have something more relevant as far as what the country would need. As I said, we have already so many colleges and universities for advanced information technology, although we are entering that digital stage, as a matter of fact. But we also need other courses, especially in the field of agriculture, in fisheries and all that. So here we have the streamlining of many of the subjects in our education department that would be relevant to the needs of the country. So it goes that other than Vice President Sara Duterte, we've also had the names and the personalities that were appointed to several positions. And a particular interest would always be the economic sector. Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Finance, the budget, etc. And we have seen how over the past 2 years, the manner by which these executive secretaries have been functioning and following the programs that have been set by President Ferdinand Jr., we have seen how effective they have been. And if there are subtractions, then it is up to us now to suspend a little judgment and give the opportunity for further review. We have this old PERT CPM, as they would call it, a program evaluation and a review technique of many of the manageable and unmanageable programs. But of course, what is important is that the public has always been the priority in President Ferdinand Marcos' mind. And that is how important it is for us to assess exactly what has happened over the past 2 years. We also look at the world in that sense because many things have been developing. We have seen the travels that our president has done, bringing to fore the idea that the Philippines is now open for foreign investments, that we are actually offering many of the industries that could be entered into by a lot of capitalists from other countries. And of course, we have received a very good response for this. And already at this stage, we have the Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Finance, and the other economic executives streamlining that roadmap, which will be part of the flow of the foreign investments that will be coming into our country. So it was like the past 2 years setting the seeds, planting the seeds on the ground that are now beginning to develop. As you've said, some perhaps are on the wayside, some are covered with weeds if they still are to be developed. And we can see that the process is actually being given the necessary impetus that is important. But I've spoken about the affairs of the world. We have seen a lot of movement in different parts which affect us. First, it was the problems we had in Afghanistan, and then the Americans pulled out, and then we had several other crinks, so to speak, in the United Nations, and then suddenly we had this problem of Ukraine and Russia, and of course that has been ongoing to this day. We are looking at that in the sense that many of the products that are coming from Ukraine and from Russia are also affected because of this conflict that they're having. From Ukraine especially, many of the flow of oil, for instance, especially for the European countries, that also has been affected. And in a way, the world is all interconnected. So we too are affected by this. And that was the reason why the president may have seen it so important that as he answers to many of the invitations to other countries, he should go in order to tell them that in spite of all the problems that the world is experiencing, the conflicts and the wars, the Philippines is there for you to look into. And the Southeast Asian region is there as the pivot of the hegemon America has also said. And so come and find out how you can be able to strengthen your investments and strengthen the countries of the region and strengthen the world economically, financially, and of course, ultimately, politically. So there we have, as I've said, how foreign relations really affect many of the things that we are doing here. And that's why President Ferdinand Jr. has looked into this really seriously. Now we look at the South China Sea. Oh, well, this is something which perhaps in history we could trace back all the way to what century that could be, when China, which was the main contender now, when China was still beginning to develop itself and Mao Zedong was still beginning the long march from his cave to Beijing, and when there were several other episodes in their history where they were coming out with elevating poverty-stricken provinces to the level where they could already be self-sufficient. So you could see how, as far as the South China Sea is concerned, their history considers this as part of their front door, their lake, their mainland occupational outlet as far as they are concerned. Now that it is developed in such a way that it is the second largest economy of the world and moving on to be perhaps even the largest, now it is even more, more threatening in a way because they do need the passageway, the navigational passageway of the South China Sea, not only for the products, but also for the entrance of the products of the world, and most importantly, the entrance of prime commodities like oil and gas and several of the other raw materials and components that they need for their industrialization and their economic growth. So there we have several other countries likewise interested in claiming some of the islands, some of the waterways, and so forth. Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and all of the other, all of the other interests that could be also passing through the South China Sea. As we said, that water system stems all the way, if you go all the way up north, if you look at the globe or the earth, all the way up north, what do you have? You have Russia there, and you have Alaska actually almost adjacent to each other. The Aleutian Islands actually holding on to the other islands there, reaching onto what is this? Vladivostok, one of the ports of the Soviet Union. It is now called the Russian Federation, by the way. And then you have the passage of that waterways passing through North and South, no, South Korea, which is connected to North Korea, which is communist and also one of the contenders in many of the conflicts that we have in our region. And then from there, from the Korean Peninsula, passing through Japan and the islands of Japan, as a matter of fact, and then all the way down now here to the Southeast Asian region, which is now composed of 10 member countries of the ASEAN. So you could see that it goes all the way, it has gone all the way from the top to all the way down. And then all the way down, you have the Celebes Sea, and then passing through several other channels until they get to the Malacca Strait and to the Indian Ocean. And from the Indian Ocean, again, passing through several of the countries and boarding the Indian Ocean. Of course, the problems we have with Myanmar, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, etc., and all of this, and the other ASEAN countries, until we reach that passageway in the crossing the Suez Canal until it enters the Mediterranean. And then, of course, you have there the Middle Eastern countries and the rest of Europe. So you see how the waters move the world, and we too move with these waters. Now, I'm speaking of this because right now we have this contentious issue with the South China Sea. And that's where our president has concentrated quite a number of statements that he has made recently because of several, I don't want to call it clashes, but something has been happening which is not quite comfortable, not just for the marine vessels, but also for the countries involved. But the countries involved only affect China and the Philippines. So you have the naval ships of China, big ones, as a matter of fact. Then you have the little boats of our fishermen, which have been shooed away and then asked to come back and then shooed away again. And then we have our little boats, which have to ply this waterway to bring supplies for the somewhere in Ayungin. This is some of those islands with many names. The Reef Islands, the Ayungin Shoal, the whatever. So if I name one, it could refer to so many others. But as we've said, these are also part of that conflict which is affecting these two countries in a way that, it has reached a point where water cannons are actually being flailed at our boats, and then exchanges of exclamations from both countries, one accusing the other as provocating the other. So it is difficult, even though we already have, the drone showing us how the movements actually are. Still, we cannot exactly say that this is categorically what has happened. So where does this lead on to? I remember how several times there have been exchanges of the statements actually. Our President Marcos Jr., calling for the Chinese ambassador and telling him that you should not be doing this to our little boats and doing this to our fishermen. And then we have a reply saying that actually you're the one that's provoking us. So this is it's like a seesaw. It's a, he says, and there would seem to be no um, well, no balancing as far as their statements are concerned. So, what could be done? Well, they're the best actually, as far as this is concerned. You have foreign ministers, you have ambassadors, and then you have our president. Itself actually has stood firm. And for that, perhaps we should grant him that respect and that admiration as far as his words are broadcast, that he will stand, like an iron steel in the claiming of territory that belongs to the Republic of the Philippines. Pretty strong words, and of course, with the firmness that carries with it the authority of his office. But then again, we have water cannons coming in the way, and then we have ministers of foreign affairs and so forth exchanging again several of their accusations one to the other. We are looking forward to that conduct of the sea, which should actually have been done, oh wow, 10, 12 years ago. How many times has the ASEAN met leaders of the 10 member countries talking about precisely the provisions of that conduct of the sea? What exactly are they debating upon when there are so many contentious interests? But with brilliant minds, there ought to be a way of threshing out the difficult provisions, etc. So, be that as it may, it is not for us to venture into analyzing this or even commenting on it, except to state that there is already a conduct of the sea that is being discussed and hopefully would be finalized soon enough. Soon enough, indeed. We can't we can't speak of a deadline. Neither can we say that it's going to be in the next ASEAN summit. But be that as it may, that is how it goes. Time and time again, we go back to several incidents in the past where conflicts, as far as waterways are concerned, have been part of several countries' discussions and debates. One of this I bring to fore, which I learned from the person whose death anniversary we are commemorating today, Sir Butch Valdez. How often has he spoken of this and discussed it quite lengthily when he mentioned that there was a time, 17th century or so, where there was this waterway passing through several countries in Europe. And all these countries were fighting each other precisely because of that navigational highway, that river, that big river that passed through these several countries. And then there was this bishop who came up with an idea. And they held a conference in a place called Westphalia. And there they discussed, what exactly are we fighting about? They're fighting about the waters. And so they decided that they will forego of what is to be a benefit to one's respective country and instead think of what would be a benefit to the neighboring country, to the left and to the right of that particular country. Was that difficult? Oh, yes. It was difficult to even think of a neighbor and to be friendly with the neighbor. Remember how it was when we had this Pan-Pacific something which was organized some time back, and the countries in the Pacific Rim could not agree with each other except the big countries, and the smaller countries were just put in the sideline. So it was like that as far as the Treaty of Westphalia was concerned. The countries looking to their left and looking to the right couldn't think of what could be a benefit to either the left or the right of them. But it took some while for them to consider that let us not just think of our own country as going to be benefited by this river or by this water system. And let us not look at the other countries beyond what is just on our right and on our left. So it simplified the contention in the same manner that perhaps here in the South China Sea, we could look at the water highway as to what could be crossing or passing through adjacent countries. So that was how they did it with the Treaty of Westphalia. They looked to the left of them and to the right of them and they tried to find out what could be pleasant enough for them to realize that they will not fight over the passage of that water highway because they consider what would be beneficial to the left and to the right of them. And so it was that they signed the Treaty of Westphalia so that they agreed that if the ships that are coming from other countries beyond the left and the right of you, and they would be stopping at your country, then that is the only time that you could impose a tariff or a fee, a parking fee or a tax or whatever else you would call it, so that the countries to the left and to the right and the countries where that ship is actually on deck will be benefited by that ship that has passed through. So to the left and to the right and the country that is being that is where the docking is happening. And so it came to pass that they had this treaty and this agreement, and what was going on for the past 36 years as a war among those nations was finally settled. So that Treaty of Westphalia has been raised many times whenever there were discussions on this, but I don't think it has been brought to the level where mainstream media or even public debates or public discussions would bring this up. So this is one thing that we have learned from Sir Butch Valdez, that if it was done before and there was really this raging conflict with so many countries involved, perhaps it could be done again. And then we go further back. I remember one of my guests and hosts when I had this program it is called Sentido Común, and I had Bono Adaza, a brilliant lawyer from Cagayan de Oro, a good friend of mine, as a matter of fact. And he spoke also of conflicts among nations in our region. And then he recalled again to mind the Bandung Conference, initiated in a way that the countries at that time, which was always having discussions of one against the other, there could be now the Bandung Conference where the countries would sit down and have a treaty of neutrality, that they would not side with any big country to affect the relationship they have with the other smaller countries in the region. So we are neighbors. We are members. At the time, there were only 5 member countries of the CETO. And still, there were other countries also within the region, although they were not formally or officially within that organization known as the CETO. Be that as it may, for as long as they are within the region, then the Bandung Conference, that treaty of neutrality, would bind all the other neighboring countries so that one country will not use another country against the other, neither would it side with another country to fight the other. Be that as it may, neutrality was the key word for that Bandung Conference. And I remember Bono and I were discussing this. It was able to be done before. Why can we not do it again today? But the flow of water doesn't change. It goes from north to south or east to west or whatever. But that's the way the flow goes. It does not go around in circles. But the sad part about it is that's what geopolitics is, actually. It's like It's like a circular movement. And that is exactly why even Barack Obama said that Asia is now the pivot point of the world. So parang anong tawag dito, para tayong center na ngayon na pag-iikutan talaga ng mundo, which is true. But they forget that it's the Philippines actually. That's like a revolving door coming from the Pacific or the western part, the eastern side of our country. You have to pass through the Philippines to go to the mainland and the other countries here in Southeast Asia. The same goes for the countries of Southeast Asia and also of mainland China. And that's what's happening, you know. They have to pass through the Philippines and you know, and before they can get into the Pacific Ocean, they have to pass through us before they can get to the Philippine rice. So that's how it is. But as I said, if several minds could recall what has happened in the past, I keep on mentioning Sir Butch Valdez as far as the Westphalia Treaty is concerned, and many other things that he has brought to mind with us, like saving the nation, my goodness, to stand firm, that our agricultural productivity is not singularly to be taken into consideration as being just one program, but together with it, the industrialization that goes with it. And together with that, the nutritive value of what is being produced by our agriculture and our aquaculture. So that, anyway, going back to how President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. operates as far as his foreign travels are concerned, I would want to believe that in meeting with all the other foreign heads of state, he has in his mind precisely, this is my country, and this is how beautiful we are, and this is how you could come and see and visit, not just for tourism purposes, but also for economic and for investment purposes. And that is why now in the world, you have organizations being formed, the BRICS, for instance, you know, and all of this. And then you have the South African organizations and many others. As a matter of fact, now you have the condemnation of NATO because it is there only to protect itself militarily, imagine, against Russia. And then you have several others which have also been now questioned. You could see the rallies now all over the world. Oh my goodness, let's mention this because that calls attention to what is happening now in Gaza, particularly in the Middle Eastern countries. And what is happening there that is actually happening now throughout the world, where you have all of these countries now asking for a ceasefire and, of course, the freedom of Palestine. So how many countries are actually having rallies? I may be diverging from the original idea of this program, but that is also part of what our president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., must be thinking of whenever he travels abroad. When he thinks of what is happening in the Gaza Strip, in the Middle Eastern countries, and also the rallies all over. So let's look at that for a while and find out exactly where the world is going as far as all of these protests are coming from. I listed down several of them, and perhaps we could just name them in a way so that all of you who are listening to us would understand, or perhaps even ask, do we have our Muslim brothers coming out by the thousands, the way people all over the world are coming out and rallying for the freedom of Palestine, and of course the demand for the cessation of hostilities in Gaza. Now, where is that list that I have? My goodness. Yes, it is important that I read this to call attention to not just to us, but to the world likewise, because that's exactly where the Gaza situation is coming from. All of this, which has brought about millions and millions of people out in the street and asking that the ceasefire should already be in effect. And I don't understand why, up to this day, there is still the bombardment of several areas in Gaza and also the killings of civilians in that particular place. Oh my goodness. It is really so sad that we have all of this coming up at this particular stage. But I cannot find the list. Maybe I should not mention that anymore. But what is important is that we are aware of the fact that there is a war going on, and that we pray that the cessation of the hostilities will actually be already implemented. So we have President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and several issues that are now coming up against him. But we have to consider the fact that he means well. He has set his programs in the right place. He has spoken to this quite often during cabinet meetings. He has inaugurated so many of the important areas where attention should be given, particularly in agriculture. Just recently, I said, before he even traveled to Tokyo, he was launching this huge equipment for the digging up of canals and irrigation canals for our fields and several others, so that what is important is that we realize that we have a president in charge. And while 2 years have passed, many of the programs that he has set are already moving. Perhaps we are not quite involved in many of this. And you know how it is. Mainstream media is somewhat a little slow when it comes to reporting all of the programs that he has set. But we have to see and understand that all of the other departments that the president has set his programs in are actually moving in such a way that there are additions, more additions than subtractions. The subtractions come for those that have been failing in their job, wanting in several items that have to be included in the programs that they have, and perhaps more additions to come in. So that is how our government is moving. And we have to place our trust in this, because we have no other choice except this country. And we have no other choice except a president elected by 31 million votes. Whatever else may come up now with so many, I don't want to say this, marites they call it, but be that as it may, we have to hold firm the way the president speaks and addresses us, with the firmness of steel, as he said, facing not just the problems we have in the South China Sea and the biggest country in the mainland, which is the People's Republic of China, but also standing firm as a member of the ASEAN, of the 10 countries in this region, but standing firm, first of all and foremost, for the Filipino people. So there we have foreign investments that are already lined up and will be coming in sooner than we think, sooner than the next couple of weeks. And the hope that we have that indeed they're already on the pipeline. And then, of course, we have many things that we have contend with, which is our own individual way of finding out how we can work harder in the jobs that we hold, how we can be able to help one another, how we can be able to actually, move about with our day-to-day life in such a way that we understand the needs of everyone, and that we can be able to serve our people in a manner, whether we are in government or in civilian life, that we can help one another, because that is what is most important. Many things have been set up for private businesses, for medium and small scale industries, and they're there. We just have to look into the different executive departments that can be able to, to come out with where we can hold on. We are not a very rich country, but we are very rich in natural and human resources. And the human resource is what I'd like to emphasize most importantly. At this stage, perhaps after all the years that I've covered the senior Ferdinand Marcos for what, 2 decades, and now the junior Marcos. I'm not covering him, by the way, but I have to talk about him because that is the family of the person I have worked with for 20 years. He is the son of the man that I respected and honored, and whose loyalty I have given. And so here is the son to whom all of us should actually give that particular concern, respect, and loyalty to the office of the presidency, because he means well, perhaps not in the same manner as father. But as I've said, can you imagine how he first held in the palm of his hands your dreams, which are his dreams? That perhaps is enough for us to realize that we're probably on the right path. There is a roadmap after all. We have a young driver, but he is driving well. So at my age, how will I say it? After the pandemic and having been confined to the house, etc., and all of this, a work from home perhaps? Well, if you like poetry, come to me, because that is what I'm most concerned with now. But the isolation of old age is not isolation at all, because I don't want to go back anymore to a former life. I want to move forward. And with the young man in front of us who is heading our republic now, yes, he's moving step by step, perhaps not as fast as his father was moving, but that was 20 years. So here we have 2 years plus 4 more. And of course, we pursue our ends and our dreams in such a way that we give meaning to our existence as individuals, as groups, as intellectuals. Remember, body, mind, and spirit. Oh my goodness. Eat properly. Take care of your bodies. Yeah. Get educated by yourself. But also be creative. That is what is important. The creative aspect of your being. And even most importantly, the spiritual side of our lives. Oh, how do we call it in Bisaya? Ang kinabuhi. That where life comes from, which is your spirit. Take care of it. And take care of the spirit of the others, so that we can bring them all to God. So, in my old age, and while I still have the passion to go on with such an advocacy, perhaps each one of you should have it likewise, before you turn in. Continue to have that passion to have service and love for one another. One's life has value for as long as our attributes have value to give to others, to improve not just our lives, but the lives of others by means of friendship, of compassion, of relationships, of love, and yes, maybe also of indignation, so that we can fight what is not good and we can fight what is evil. So with that, it's been a long ending for 2023. We already had the flight to Egypt of the Holy Family, because remember, Herod ordered the massacre of the newborns and the infants, fearing that there will be one among them that will be king. Oh my goodness. Let that king be within you, the king within your hearts, the God that is within every one of us. And we also have the visitation of the 3 wise men, the Magi. We see the Belen, for instance, where you have the three adorned men carrying the gifts for a king: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But you must remember that Joseph was from Bethlehem. That's why he went there to register for the census. That's his birthplace. But they live in Nazareth. So when he got there, puno na yung bahay nila eh. Yung sinasabi nga, there was no place in the inn. Wala talagang kwarto na sa inn, because lahat ng taga doon nakatira na sa mga boarding houses doon, mga motels, hotels, etc. Pero doon mismo sa family home ni Joseph, wala na din lugar, kaya doon sila sa shed. Okay, pero pagkatapos na nanganak na si Jesus, pinanganak na si Jesus, they had to go back na. Kasi nga, in that dream, sinabi nga na Herod was afraid na merong king na pinanganak na baka siya palitan na nga sooner than he feared anyway. So those are the holy days that we commemorate. And summing up, we also commemorate Lolo Pepe. Better get that book. It's very well written. It's like talking about your grandfather, actually, Lolo Pepe, Jose Rizal, actually. And then, of course, the death anniversary of my good friend and somebody I honor so well, Sir Bush Valdez. Next year, I may open our chronicles with the Save the Nation movement together with Let Us Save Our Souls movement likewise. So I go back to many ancient civilization. I always go back to the Roman times and you know, I always bring out what happened at the time with the philosophers, etc. And I brag about the Roman law and all of this. Oh my goodness, meron pa palang predated na civilization prior to the Romans where they had what? They already had algorithms, they had trigonometry, they had all of this calculation. The Sumerian civilization, Babylon. When I interviewed Saddam Hussein, that's exactly what he said. Here is the mother of all civilizations, Mesopotamia. So recently, when I was doing my research, oh my goodness, astrology, even our measurement of time of 60 seconds in 1 minute, 60 minutes in 1 hour, that's Sumerian. That's Babylonian. That's Mesopotamia. That's Iraq that we call it today. Anyway, so I'll open next year with that precisely, ancient history and contemporary history. But meanwhile, let's pray for our government, pray for each other, pray for our families, pray for ourselves, and most importantly, pray for the junior, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Thank you for having joined me. This is Rita Gadi, and this has been your Chronicles.